Welcome everybody. Hope you guys are having a okay Sunday morning. Oh, feels really loud. It's okay? Okay, well it feels really loud to me. As you guys can tell, I'm not Pastor John, and Pastor John's not here today, and that's because his family is on vacation, and so he asked me to cover for him while they are away. And so if you guys could also be praying for them while they are on vacation and for a safe return home, that would be fantastic. Anyways, over the past couple of months, Pastor John has been going over the different teachings of Jesus, and so he asked me to backfill one of the teachings that he has not had a chance to go over. And so if you guys could open with me to Matthew chapter 5, verse 33 to 37, that's where we're going to be camping out for today. And so it's also on the screen if you guys don't have it. So just to give a little bit of background to what we're looking at, today's passage comes from the Sermon on the Mount, which is Jesus' teachings to not only his disciples, but just whoever was gathered around him during that time. And so as we look at this section of chapter 5, it's really broken up into three different sections. The first being Jesus reminding the Israelites of an old law. The second part being Jesus trying to explain what the original intent and what the heart behind the law was. And then he kind of gives a final statement to recap what he means by the heart of the law. And so I'll read this section of scripture. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "Do not break your oaths, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." And so as I was preparing this week, this sermon, and just reviewing what I've done for the youth in the past with the sermon, one thing that was really impressed upon me was that at the core of this passage, it's really not about oaths, but it's really about our integrity and our words. And just generally, what I really like about Jesus' teachings is it really challenges us and questions us to really think about, am I living a righteous life, or am I being like Jesus? And so today we're going to be looking at generally oaths. And so what was going on during Jesus' time was a lot of people were giving oaths as a promise, right? So they're saying, "I swear by the heavens that I'll pay you back some money," or something like that, or "God, if you do this for me, I'll give more offering," or something along those lines. And so a more modern translation might be, "I swear I'll do this," or "I promise I won't do that," or "I swear on my mom's grave that, this," or "God, if you do this for me, I'll give money to the homeless." Something like that. I think we've heard these type of stuff in our daily lives, or maybe we have used them in the past too. But one of the biggest issues, or one of the bigger issues regarding oaths during this time was many people were using oaths as a way to cover for their lies or their deception. And so many people would say, "Oh, I swear by the heavens, I'll return this to you." But in reality, they have no intention of returning what was borrowed, and instead was saying, "Hey, I swear to earn the trust of the other person." And so Jesus addresses this issue of oaths and vows, and really looks at the underlying problem with oaths, vows, and promises. And so, as Jesus does throughout a lot of chapter 5 on Sermon on the Mount, Jesus reminds the Israelites of an Old Testament law. And it says, "Do not break your oaths, but fulfill fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made." And this law actually comes from Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. And it says, "A man who makes a vow to the Lord or makes a pledge under oath must never break it. He must do exactly what he said he would do." And so here in verse 33, Jesus is kind of just recapping what was said in the Old Testament law. He just says, if you make a vow, you better keep it. And I guess one question that I thought of was, why is it so important that we keep our vows, especially when we make it to the Lord? And I think it really comes into play when we look at the third commandment of the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 2, verse 7. It says, "You must not misuse the name of the Lord. The Lord will not let you go unpunished if you misuse his name." And when it comes to oaths and promises that we make, especially when we are making it to God or to other people, we don't want to be misrepresenting God's name. And during the time of the Israelites, what they were doing was they were using God's name as a cover for their deception. So they're really associating God's name with something that was kind of cheap, something that was dishonorable. And they really misrepresented who God was and ultimately made God's name kind of powerless. And that was kind of what was going on during their time. Dishonesty, deception, and dishonor. And while Jesus, throughout the Sermon on the Mount, reminds them of this old law and to try to bring out the heart here, I think the Israelites, in large part, they kind of forgot about this law in total. I'm sure that they've heard it growing up, that their parents have told them, hey, if you make a vow to the Lord, you better keep it. But instead of remembering and keeping it, they've not only kind of forgotten and not held onto the vows that they've made, but they've actually, in some cases, turned it evil and used it as a cover for their dishonesty. And so, unfortunately, I don't think much has changed in the past 2,000 years. I know some people today, we still make vows, we still make promises, and we still break them. And some people, they do it more dishonestly and use it as a cover for their dishonesty. And so the challenge for us as followers of Jesus is that if we do make a promise, we need to make sure that we follow up on it, especially if we make a promise to the Lord. But in the next verse 34, Jesus says, 34, 35, 36, Jesus says it's better not to make a promise or an oath to begin with. And so what I think Jesus here is saying is that if you do make a vow, you better keep it, but it's better not to make vows, oaths, and promises to begin with. And I think he says that for a couple of reasons, which we'll be looking at right now. And so in verse 34, 35, 36, it says, but I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And so Jesus kind of lists all the things that you can kind of swear by. You can swear by the heavens, you can swear by the earth, or things on the earth. You can swear by some great city. But Jesus makes it clear. He says, don't do that. And so don't swear by my name, don't swear by anything. And again, I think part of the reason is these are things that, God is in heaven, he created things on earth, and so when we say these things, when we make vows to God, when we make vows to other people and we don't break it, we break it, we kind of bring disrespect to God's name, and ultimately that is sinning, because we're called to honor and keep God's name holy and sacred. In the next verse 36, this was a little more confusing for me, but as I was studying it and I was meditating on it, Jesus says, do not swear by even your own head, for you cannot make it even one hair white or black. And ultimately, I think the reason why Jesus says you shouldn't swear on the things of heaven, on the things of earth, but you can't even swear on your own life by saying, I swear on my life that I'll do this, is because when we even swear on our own lives, it's kind of an empty promise, because we don't have full control of our lives. We don't know when we'll be able to complete the oath that we have given, or if we'll even be able to. We have no guarantee that we will do what we said we will do. And so when we give an oath on our life, it's kind of meaningless. It has no power, because the instant we say the oath, like, I promise to, help the homeless tomorrow. We don't even know if we'll be around for tomorrow. And so Jesus basically makes a blanket statement with all these things and says, just don't make oaths, period. Don't make oaths, period. And so ultimately, Jesus tells us, don't make oaths. And so I think there's two main reasons why. Number one, when we make vows or oaths, it holds us accountable to really keeping it, and failure to do so is sin. And I think the biggest issue is the failure to do so is sin. Because as human beings, I know I make promises, a lot of promises in my own life or to other people, and I try my best to keep them, but a lot of the times, I sometimes forget or I'm unable to due to an unforeseen circumstance. Number two, we have no guarantee that we will be able to fulfill the vow. And so these two reasons, I think, Jesus kind of tells, don't get yourself in trouble by putting yourself in this pit where you're not sure you can fulfill this vow or not. And so to look at the heart of what this passage is saying at the core, and why I think this is really about integrity and not just oaths, is because when you think of people who say, I swear or I'll make this vow, what type of people usually tend to do this? Usually the people that tend to say, hey, I promise I'll do this, I swear I'll do this, is people whose words don't have a lot of meaning, they don't have a lot of power. It's because what they say, it can't be completely trusted. And that's why this day and age, because our words are not super trustworthy, we have to sign contracts and sign a lot of stuff to make sure that will hold us responsible for doing what we said we would do. It's because our words have lost its power. And so what gives our words power? It's the person that stands behind what is said. And so to give an example, let's say there's two people. Person A will be Jim, person B will be Joe. And so person A has lived a life that is, pretty honest. He tries his best to keep all his promises, his oaths. He shows up on time to different appointments, and generally tries to be a good person. But person B here, Joe, for example, he's kind of the opposite of person A. He isn't the best at keeping track of time. He's not really reliable. In the past, he's asked you for favors, but he hasn't really followed through on anything. And so let's say both come before you and ask you for $100. For person A, since I've witnessed his life, his character, I would be more willing to let him borrow $100 because I know when he says, I'll pay it back, I know he's good to pay it back. But for person B, if he says, no, can I borrow $100? I'll probably be like, I'm not so sure if I can. And then he'll say something like, I swear, or I promise, or on my mom's grave, I'll pay it back to you by next week. And he says, I know I'm good for it. But the thing is, I don't know if he's good for that $100 or not. And so I don't really feel comfortable giving $100 to person B. And so the character behind what we say is really important, and our character gives meaning to our words. And so people who say, I swear a lot, or I promise, or I swear by God that I'll do this, they only really have to resort to that when the other party really questions the sincerity of the verbal promise that the other person is making to the other person. And so I think the first thing I want us to think about today is when we make verbal promises, when we say a yes or no to things, are people asking, are you sure? Or, or do they act a little iffy around it? Because I think it's a telltale sign if we're constantly be second-guessed about when we say yes or no to certain things, that maybe we're not the best with keeping our promises, we're not the best at keeping our oaths, we're not the best at keeping our vows. And maybe we need to really reconsider if we're following through on what we said we would do. I think it would be awesome if not just me, but as a general community, we'd be really known for being people who follow through, who are committed to doing what they said they would do or not do. And I think it would be a really bold statement if someone asked you for a favor and you said yes, that would be enough. That yes would just be enough. And I think that would speak such a great testament, would be a great testament to our character and our integrity. And so, to give an example, is a real life example is I had a friend in high school, which was, I guess, not too long ago for me, where he would always call me up and say, hey, I'll be there in 5 minutes, but it took him 30 minutes. Or he would say, I'll be there in 10 minutes, and he'll be there in 1 hour. And in one extreme case, he said he would be there in 10 minutes. He didn't show up for an hour and a half. And so I just thought, okay, he just bailed on me. But he showed up at some random time at night. And so after a while, he kept on breaking these small promises. And I thought, oh, okay, well, if he says he'll be there in 10 minutes, I'll leave 15 minutes later because I know by the time I get there, I'll still be earlier than him and he'll still be late. So he kind of got that reputation of, oh, he kind of is not trustworthy, at least when it comes to keeping his time promises. And it took him a long time to repair that image, especially throughout college, where I would start showing up late because I anticipated he would be late, but he would actually show up on time, and so I would go a little bit later. And so it took a while for him to repair his reputation, but it's possible. And so my encouragement to those of us that might have trouble keeping our promises is to start now, and it's not too late, although it might be difficult. We need to start somewhere. And I think the ultimate example of someone living out consistently, if we look at verse 37, is all you need to say is simply yes or no. I think the ultimate example of that is Jesus, that he is someone who's lived his life consistently, that if he said he would do it, he would do it, and if he said he wouldn't do it, he wouldn't do it. He practiced what he preached, and not just in this passage, but just throughout the Sermon on the Mount and just throughout Jesus' life. He is the epitome of practicing what he preaches, and he calls us to be like him. And I'm so thankful that we serve a God who doesn't say just, hey, let your yeses be yes and your noes be noes, but he actually practices it and gives us an example to follow. And so I think I know God calls us to be this type of people where when we say yes, the integrity of our words is enough to say, for them to believe it. Or when we say no, we won't do something, that's enough too. And so God, he said he would send his son, that his son would die on the cross for us and for all of sins of mankind, and that's exactly what Jesus did. And I'm so thankful that he was faithful to what he would say, that no one had to say, Jesus, are you sure you're going to do this for us? And I'm glad that he followed through without hesitation. And so we're called to be people of good character and integrity because of what Jesus did for us first, that he followed through and was faithful to us first by dying on the cross. And so it's not something that we're called to do just because, he tells us to do it, but he calls us to do it because he's done it first. And so how does this relate to us? Just a couple of questions to think about. What's my reputation? Am I sincere with my words when I make promises, or do I just make promises needlessly and end up breaking them? Or do I have a reputation that where I say yes or no is enough? And so God calls us to be a people of integrity, especially when it comes to our words. And so this is the higher calling that Jesus calls all Christians to be people who keep our promises, who keep our oaths. And again, I'm not saying this is something that's easy, because I've definitely had trouble keeping some promises in the past. And I guess to encapsulate what I'm saying, I want to end with this just one sentence. Jesus commands us to not swear at all. Instead, for our characters to be of integrity, that our words can be believed without an oath. And so I think that's the goal that we should all strive for today.